The Conservative leadership for the federal party has yet to be fully announced. The leadership organizing committee hasn't even been struck, and no one's really throwing their hat in the ring for sure. This man that is going to join me now keeps refusing to throw his hat in the ring despite my pleadings. Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall joins me now from his office in Regina. Before I asked you to come on and talk about what the Conservative Party needs to do going forward, and you've made some public comments about this. Can I just ask you before we start, is it still no?
It is still no.
What can I do today to get you into the leadership? No.
There's an advantage to just sticking with the truth. You don't have to remember a bunch of stories.
Yeah.
So all I have to remember is no. I would say this, though. Truly, Brian, every time I'm asked, even if I'm considering it or is it something that I think about, it's humbling. And it truly is. It's an honor to even be thought of in that way by some Canadians. And I appreciate that. We've received very, kind emails and some outreach, and it's been that people have been very generous about that. But I have an election to fight here in Saskatchewan in a few months, and we have a mandate we're going to work hard to earn again another 4 years. And I think I got if you want a political job, I think this is the best one in the country. And so people should be asking federal leaders, why aren't you running to be Premier of Saskatchewan?
Maybe because a lot of them don't live there. And we do need you there to keep the NDP back. Let me ask you then, one of the reasons that your names come forward, even from people that aren't Conservative supporters, they point to addresses like you gave at the Manning Conference a year or so ago. You explained Conservative values in simple terms with a smile on your face. Do we need that going forward, someone to retake the storytelling narrative? Because as I think it was Ken Bosencool was writing in Maclean's a little while ago, Ken Bosencool and Sean Spear, they said, we thought we'd won the argument over deficits. Obviously, that's a fight we need to win again. We need good communicators at the fore of this leadership, don't we?
Well, we do. And we need to not take ourselves so seriously. That's the starting point. Leave that to others. And if we're a lot more earnest about how we approach issues, and we find a little humor in ourselves, especially in how we approach issues, and we communicate that's going to affect, that'll have a positive impact with Canadians, because you know what? That's how Canadians treat each other. I've always said that, if the Saskatchewan Party can work hard, not to please everybody all the time necessarily, but at least to reflect Saskatchewan values back to Saskatchewan people. If we're working at that, even as we have to make tough decisions, we're going to be in a pretty good spot. And I believe that today. And the other thing I would just say, Brian, is that free enterprise-oriented or favoring politicians, we don't finish the sentence. And what I mean by that is that the sentence always starts with some economic principle. We believe in fiscal probity. We want the GDP to grow. We believe in competitive taxes. We believe in competitive labor legislation. And we don't finish the sentence. And when we do, we kind of just stop it because that'll create the environment for job creation in the country. That's actually not the end of the sentence. The end of the sentence is always quality of life. If we avoid deficits this year, even in a challenging time, and we don't add to the operating debt of the province, that's good for families. It's good for future generations. It's also good for the current generation, because when things improve, we're going to have some resources to invest. We're going to have a stronger economy because of that fiscal probity, and that improves quality of life. And that's the end of the sentence. When we first took over in office, Brian, I could tell you there were a wait list of 440 people who had intellectual disabilities waiting for the dignity of a residence. And we have now, and even had then, a strong economy and a strong fiscal balance sheet. And so we asked the question, on the base of on the strength of this broadened tax base, how much would it cost to eliminate that wait list for people with intellectual disabilities that would simply want the dignity of a group home space? Mm-hmm. It was a $40 million bill, and so we set out to do it. Now, is that right wing or left wing? I mean, I don't care, but it wouldn't have been done without a strong economy. And so we want competitive taxes and a competitive labor legislative environment and fiscal probity, because that sets the stage for us being able to eliminate that wait list of 440 people left behind by the Social Democrats, by the way. And that's the end of the sentence. It's a long, maybe that's why we don't get into it, because it takes a long time to tell the story. We can narrow it down and finish the sentence, and I think more Canadians would respond.
I always try and talk to people who are not in favor of fiscal balance and want more social spending. How much would the $11 billion that we pay annually as a nation just on the federal interest payments, I mean, not even the debt payments, the interest, how much could you do with that $11 billion? And they always look and they go, yeah, that's a lot of money. If we didn't have that, and interest rates are low now. So, I mean, that could be a lot more in a little while. We could do so much more as a country.
Precisely. You can do that with taxation policy as well. We, through personal income tax changes that we made reductions, tax cuts in the end through basic exemption changes and child tax benefit changes, ended up in being historic personal income tax reductions for the people of the province. We dropped 114,000 low-income people off the tax rolls completely.
You know how I know
people.
that? Do you know how I know that? Because you share infographics on Twitter, on Facebook, all the time. You brag a lot.
We're quite insufferable with our infographics.
But is that part of what whoever wins the next leadership race has to be about? I mean, they have to be about learning how these new communication tools work. You can't just leave that all to the other side. You can't just leave it to professionals or support groups. You've got to be able to toot your own horn or make an argument in 140 characters or a little infograph and convey something.
Agreed. And we're still working at it. We're imperfect, but we're working every day at trying to communicate these the basic principles. The communication, of course, is just is towards the end of the steps. You got to have the policy first, obviously, the substantive policy, and free enterprise favoring politicians know basically what that policy is going to look like. But then, how do we translate that into families, Saskatchewan or Canadian families' lives, an impact on their lives? At 114,000 people, low-income people, don't pay any tax at all, provincial income tax at all in the province. The feds are still taxing them, and that's a tax cut. Now, the middle class benefited as well, but we don't always focus actually even on the benefit to middle or upper middle class folks as a result of the changes. That's part of it. We're proud of it. But it's an interesting argument to make to our friends on the other side of the spectrum to say, well, you've got a stereotype of our party as a small c or a free enterprise favoring party, and here's what we did: 114,000 low-income people pay no income tax here in the province, and so it's a point that's worth making.
I remember being in that income tax bracket and politicians telling me, well, you need a new program. And I said, no, let me keep my own money and I'll be better off. And you're working to prove that. In terms of names, do you have any names that are floating around that you think should be jumping in the race? Should the party take a long time and look for people outside of the political realm maybe?
Well, I'll just be very direct and say I have no names to suggest. I would say that I don't think there's a rush. They've chosen well, and Rona Ambrose, I think, is the interim leader. She's already demonstrating that, I think, as leader of the opposition. And so now I think they're in a very good spot to have a deliberative process and make sure they get the right person, woman, or man that can lead the party forward. And I just don't think there's a rush.
I was speaking with retired Senator Marjorie LeBreton a little while ago, and she goes back to Diefenbaker days and worked with every leader from Diefenbaker to Stephen Harper, and we were talking about this so-called red Tory Harperite divide. She says that it's completely overplayed by a media that's infatuated with a party that no longer exists. As someone that moves in these circles, in political circles, do you think there really is a divide among different types of conservatives at the federal level?
No, there's a debate. I know there will be a debate amongst conservatives in terms of policies, and some will perhaps take a more market-oriented side, and some will take a bit more government interventionist side. But please, I mean, I completely agree with the senator. Let's stop talking in terms of red Tories or any other color of Tories. There are conservatives, and just like conservative parties in any country around the world, there will be parts of that party, groups within that party who most readily identify with market policies, and those who are perhaps less so in terms of that particular part of the spectrum. But who voted in this last election in that context? We're thinking in terms of, well, I wonder if this person's a red Tory or an old Reformer conservative or an old Alliance. Of course they didn't. That's not where average Canadians would. That's not where they're at in terms of looking at the Conservative Party. They're going to look at policies. They're going to look at the individual candidates of the leader, and they're going to make a decision. And if people are pining away for the days of how it used to be, let's remember, as I've said in the media, that all ended with the Conservative caucus being able to have a meeting on an ATV. That did not end well when there seemed to be a focus on one part of the party or the other. So I just think it's very wise if Those who favor free enterprise market policies get together and not worry about characterizing each other, categorizing each other in these terms, these antiquated terms that nobody uses anymore.
All right. Well, except inside the Ottawa bubble, which I try and escape as often as I can. Premier Wall, looking forward to seeing you in the Ottawa bubble next time you're here. All the best, and thanks so much.
Thanks for your time, Brian. All the best.